In the Pits now has a Patreon. Whether you want to get directly involved with the show, have a product or brand you want to promote, or just want to show support, In the Pits Patreon has tiers for all levels. Head to patreon.com/inthepitspaintballpodcast to check out the supporter, sponsor, and partner tiers. Opening up a Patreon was a level I could never have imagined getting to when starting this show a year ago. And whether I get 1,000 subscriptions or not a single one, I'm still super thankful for all of the support I've received from all of you. Enjoy the episode. In the Pits is partnered with Uno's Jerky. Made right here in the state of Texas by JC Limon, Uno's has some of the best tasting jerky around, and each flavor has ties back to Texas paintball. I personally recommend the Texas Titan flavor. Head to unosjerky.com and use code PITS10, where a portion of every purchase will go back into the Texas paintball scene. In the Pits is sponsored by Hermes. Hermes has you covered for custom headwear, all hand-cut and hand-sewn here in the Lone Star State. From unique batik patterns to wax designs, hand-dyed material, and other soft goods and casual wear. Check out Hermes on Instagram at HermesPB. In the Pits is sponsored by Hustletown Paintball. Hustletown is a brand by Jason Tinsley of Houston that is all about representing Houston paintball and highlighting its local talent. Head to hustletownpaintball.net to browse their selection of casual wear and use code PIT10 for 10% off of your order. In the Pits is partnered with Compete. Compete is a Texas-based brand by Jell Stewart of professional team AC Diesel that provides custom jerseys, pants, headbands, straps, tech shirts, and any other soft goods to help individuals and teams compete at the highest level. Support Texas paintball and message Compete on Facebook or Instagram and mention In the Pits Podcast for 10% off your entire order. In the Pits is sponsored by FUAthletics, created with a purpose and focused on building a better you. We are a brand that matters in your workout, and every purchase gives back to cancer research. Go to thefuathletics.com and use code INTHEPITS25 for 25% off of your order. In the Pits is partnered with Get Dat Shot. Get Dat Shot now offers first-in-line photo and video editing, 20% off Get Dat Shot merch, and 20% off prints to all teams that wear the Get Dat Shot logo on their jersey. Message GetDat_shot on Facebook or Instagram to become a Get Dat Shot program team. In the Pits is partnered with Paintball Kumite. Paintball Kumite is a program designed by Colt Roberts of professional team San Antonio X Factor to take paintball players of all ages, experience levels, and skill groups and mold them into champions. The program breaks the game down into small, easy-to-learn sessions designed to help you master the fundamentals so that you can elevate your game. Newcomers to the program get a free 1-hour introductory class when mentioning In the Pits. To sign up for a class, message at Paintball Kumite on Instagram. Welcome, everyone, to episode 50 of In the Pits Paintball Podcast. This podcast is focused on everything that has to do with the paintball scene here in Texas, from professional players and teams to new divisional programs, local tournament series, field owners, Texas-based brands, even photographers and videographers. Every week, we'll have a short and sweet episode with a new topic and a new special guest. I'm Christian Smith. I'm a player for the Texas Titans, and this episode we are going in the pits with the voice of paintball himself, Matty Marshall. Matty, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing absolutely spectacular, my friend. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. This has been a long journey these past almost full year, and part of me is just can't believe that I'm at this point, being able to get yourself on the show. So I appreciate you coming on, taking some time out of your day for this.
Hey, my pleasure, man. Episode 50, congratulations. Creating any sort of, as we were kind of talking before we went live, creating any sort of digestible nugget of information to give to the world, to get them to care is kind of a pain in the ass sometimes. And it's and you have to put yourself out there. You're putting other people out there and you're trying to get those people to be honest with their stories. It's hard. But there is no other way forward if you want to get people to get excited about something other than taking them to play paintball. But the only other way is to tell them a super awesome paintball story. So I also have to say I'm gonna have to apologize ahead of time because you said, in your intro, short and sweet. Man, I can do sweet, but bro, short, that's not my specialty, dude.
Well, I think everybody who's been listening to or been involved in paintball the last couple of years, I think we're more than okay with that. We know that there's definitely going to be, even if it's long and sweet, we know it's going to be chock full of meat and potatoes there. So let's go ahead and get started with this thing. So there are a lot of viewers out there who know of you, but maybe relatively newer in the scene, such as myself. I've only been involved in paintball since February of 2015. So even though that's 8+ years now, that's still very little in comparison to the overall history of paintball. So could you tell us, how long have you been involved in paintball, and what are some of the teams that you have either played for or been involved with over the years?
Well, I started playing in 1993, late 1993, when I was 15. And then I was lucky because the field that I went and played as a, super newbie, fun, just having a good time with my buddies, paintball player, happened to be at a place called Borderland. Borderland, true to its name, right down by the Mexico border, in a place called Otay Lakes by a skydiving port, kind of eastern part of San Diego. And the dude that owned that field was one of the leaders of a pro team that was really good and won championships in the 80s. So this is mid to early 90s. And his name was Barry Arena. So he owned the field. But he was one of the prime movers kind of that current incarnation of Navarone. While the sport was changing from pump guns into semi-automatic from a technological standpoint. So that dude came up to me and he was like, "Hey, kid, you're pretty good." This was a couple months into playing. And he was like, "Hey, if you want to come and try out for our I know that there's a tournament team here, but I mean, I'd only played paintball maybe 3 or 4 times before Barry was like, 'Hey, come and try out for our pro team.'" So that was a blessed confluence of being in the right place at the right time with the right type of talent, and so I was able to to get on that team. That team was again Navarone, and then ended up playing for Navarone for a while and kind of made a charge. We took like a 4th place pro. These are all different stories, and then ended up playing for on the transition before I got on Ironman in '98 because they were revamping with a lot of young guys, like Billy Wing, Michael McLaughlin, myself, Davey Williamson, Eric Roberts, and then Oliver Lang after that. Then the next generation came up, Yosh Rao. And then we won with them. And but I know there's a lot of divisional guys watching this, but and then I went on to help found Excessive and then retired to do what I do now. But and then I played with Joy Division in Europe too, because that was kind of so there's a lot of stories here because there were now it's like you take American Mercenaries and go to Europe and win. Harrison Fry just helped Joy Division win. I think I got a lot of skin in that game because I played for Joy Division in 2001 and we won Brighton Beach against like Avalanche and Image and some badass teams back in the day with like a bunch of Swedes and me, Oliver Lang and Mike McLaughlin. So it's been a fun ride, man. It's been a pretty good adventure so far.
And I bet I can't even imagine. Like, there's one person in the chat, one of my teammates, Leo Lamas. He says he was 1 year old in 1993. So just to tell you, like, there's definitely some history that, especially the newer players, like, we just got to hear this, and I'd love to be able to capture some of these things. So, I mean, getting into a pro team after 3rd or 4th time playing paintball ever. What was it that made you get into paintball in the first place?
To be honest, it was to play war. That's why I played paintball. It wasn't like a game. I mean, it was a game, but I grew up on a canyon in San Diego, California, and we would just do wrist rocket wars. I mean, dude, we were throwing and shooting anything we possibly could at each other from the second I could get my hands on any of that stuff. This was like pre-nerf, like whatever. We didn't have any of that like force on force stuff. So when I had a buddy of mine that had played paintball, was like, hey, you know, and then well, we had saw it on I saw it on it was on the Real World LA, the second Real World ever. And they had went and played just a fun day of paintball, and it was like 10 o'clock at night. Me and my buddies were kind of hanging out at my house before we all, you know, went back. They went back to their pads, and my buddy was like, "Oh, I played paintball before," because I was like, "Holy shit! I didn't even know that there was a thing. Really, I didn't know that paintball existed, or I would have been playing that from the second I possibly could have known that it was a thing. Because the second I found out that it was a thing, I was like, "Holy shit! You can go play war in the woods? Oh, dude, with guns and you can shoot each other legally? This is awesome." So, and that's not a really PC thing to say these days because it's, you know, it has evolved into this colorful and very charismatic game. But I didn't start playing paintball because it was a sport. I went because it was like, oh, we're going to get in a gunfight in the woods and see who wins. Like that's what still to this day, kind of how I look at it, you know? It's like if there's a zombie apocalypse, like Dynasty's going to own everything because they're killing everybody and winning everything now. So, so that's why I wanted to do it because I had grown up on a canyon that I spent every waking moment I possibly could in that canyon, doing all sorts of, you know, anything force on force that we could find. And then once I found out the paintball was a thing, went and played it and just immediately fell in love with it, man. Like I was like, there's a certain almost subliminal, sublime appreciation that of just life itself after you leave a day of paintball. I mean, it doesn't matter what happens after that. You get a parking ticket. Somebody could be yelling at you. Like the volume of life gets turned down. So, and I just love that. And then I kind of was seeking, once I was trying to wrap my head around it, I just wanted to seek out the best players that I could play against and try to beat them.
It's incredible how powerful that bug is once you've got bit by it for the first time. I remember my very first time playing paintball was right after my freshman year of high school. And even though technically my first kill in paintball was a surrender, but even that feeling just made it like, oh, this is something that I want to do. And while kind of looking back on it, I was a little bit sad that I didn't get into it sooner because I lived right down the street from X Factor. But now like it's incredible just what gets you into the game the first time, the bug, and then the completely different bug of competition that keeps you there and brings you to that higher level. So kind of continuing forward, and with how long you've been in the game, I'm sure that you've witnessed ebbs and flows, all different kinds of changes and improvements, going to new trends, going away from them over the years. So this question is brought to us by Hustletown Paintball. Head to hustletownpaintball.net, use code PIT10 for 10% off of your order. So throughout all of the years, what are some of the more notable things that have changed within paintball, either just the rec side or the experience, or even within tournaments, either for better or for worse?
I mean, at the end of the day, everything has changed and nothing has changed. Literally every single fraction of from head to toe, except for maybe the JT Spectras. But other than that, like everything has changed, but nothing's changed in the sense. So all of the different details, the paint jobs and the mechanism upon which that we build the initial pretense of this activity, all that's changed. But the pretense of the activity, like why we're doing it, is exactly the same. Those dudes got guns and those dudes got guns. Who's the best? Who's going to win? That's it. That's what we're doing. So, and the details of how upon which that prime, essential instigating event happens, like all that's changed. But so, and yeah, I mean, I could spend hours talking about because when I started playing, I mean, it was like Marty Bush, who I ended up being a teammate with on the Ironman in '98 when I got on the team. But and I remember walking out, like we were just wearing goggles back in the day, and like it was raining in Dallas and Texas event. It was my first Texas event, and I had, wanted to go watch the Ironman play. And I walk out, and so this is how blessed we are now. You can like tune into the webcast or watch a video on YouTube. But in order to watch pro paintball back in the day, you had to physically go to the location that was happening, and then you had to figure out and like look at the schedule because that shit wasn't always right. And then you had to find out where the field was, and you had to walk out, and it's a 10-man big ass woods ball field, and you got to find where you can at least get a glimpse of these legends rolling around out there. And Marty Bush comes pushing up on this one side, and the Ironmen are just fucking this team up and just talking shit and having a good time. And Marty Bush ends up coming through, and he's like calling his shot. He's like, I'm gonna go here and shoot this guy, and like he's just using a pump gun, dude. So like there was pump guns being used in professional paintball at that time period by by one of the best to ever do it, Marty Bush. And then if you fast forward, not even that long amount of time. I mean, fast forward 20 years in the grand scheme of things, that's not a ton. But in 2004, they were trying to take the guns back down because in 2004 was the Wild Wild West. I mean, we were shooting chainsaws at each other. Like I remember getting the first DM3 at World Cup in 2003. And it had an Aggie board in it, and anyone that knows what that is knows what I'm talking about. And I had been using a single trigger matrix that whole first season of the NXL, and I finally get one of them, like the crazy machine guns. Bro, that thing was a laser beam of paintballs. It's shooting paintballs this close to each other. It's like 25 balls a second. It was a walking bunker. I remember I went over to the Oakland Assassin dudes, and I was like, you dudes have had these all year long? How have you not won every event? And like, it was unbelievable, bro. Like, it's so, and then we had to bring it back from 25, like uncapped ramp, which essentially was around, I'd say about 25, 26 balls a second. And we're playing, like games are finishing 15, 13. We're playing 25-minute halves in X-Ball. I remember counting my welts one year in Vegas at the end of the event when I was like going up the center a bunch and, bunker people getting bunkered, shooting, people getting destroyed. And I had like 120 something welts from like just the top of my head to my belt line. So, like a lot had changed during that pump gun to laser, like chainsaw machine guns, with X-Ball and 7-man and 10-man and different time periods or how long the games are and all that sort of stuff. But at the end of the day, it's the same shit. It's those people have guns and those people have guns, and we're about to play a game of paintball. Who wins?
Yep. I mean, the motivations are, it seems like that drive for competition, just, hey, me and my group of friends are better than you and your group of friends. It's just what it always comes down to. And just the different ways over the years that I guess the parameters for that have changed. But I mean, the competition is still there. And I think, especially right now in what feels like an exciting time in paintball, we're starting to see more blood, kind of fresh blood, breath of fresh air, breathe back into it, at least locally here in Texas. I don't know if you're feeling the same sentiment on the national scene, but here in Texas, we're definitely seeing that a lot more. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple different ways you could look at this, but just currently in the NXL standings, the fact that the Hurricanes have come in and done so well, Aftermath has a completely new team built with divisional players. They just came off a pretty solid performance where they took 6th, went undefeated in the prelims. New York Extreme, though, and some of these guys have been around for a long time at a divisional level, but we're seeing that at the top end. I do continue to see certain names and teams pop up on the divisional side of things when it gets to center court for the big battles for first and second. But yeah, I mean, COVID was good for paintball. Everyone I know that was running a paintball business, a field or a store, and I'm not talking about like the ones that are not run professionally, but the ones that are run well. Like, I mean, they did really well during COVID because there wasn't a lot to do. You're either going to go play golf, take your kids to the park, or you can go play paintball. I mean, there's a few other things, but so COVID was actually good for paintball. Another thing that's good for paintball is that a lot of people that grew up, giving their all to this game 10 years ago, or 15 years ago, or even longer than that, they have now become grown-ass humans that have regular jobs and money, and they've set their lives up in a way where they're like, you know what, man, like, I really love paintball. I'm gonna go play a couple events a year, and their significant others are like, yeah, please do. I need you out of the house for a little bit so you can, be a better human. And that's kind of what paintball does to you. If you look at it the right way, it makes you a better human. So I agree. There has been a new influx of players. The regional leagues are strong. The fields and stores seem to be doing pretty well. We are riding an upswing again, and that's a blessing for sure.
I can't tell you how many times online in the different Facebook groups I hear looking to get back into the game after so many years. You're seeing that more and more day by day. And I think a lot of that, those players that are now getting back in were inspired from things that they saw 10, 15, 20 years ago, a lot of which featured you. So this next question is brought to us by Paintball Kumite, which is Colt Roberts' training regimen. Special shout out to Colt Roberts for connecting us together, making this episode possible. So your history as a player, part of that, in at least in my personal research doing for this episode, I went and watched Push, Sunday Drivers, and Heroes for a Day for the very first time. So in these films, you played for the Ironmen, and then you also played for Sacramento Excessive. And during these films, during this time, you are constantly referred to by your teammates as one of the best back players in the world. So what were some of the things that you personally were doing differently at the time, either in your preparation or maybe different techniques that you're doing, or the way or how often that you drilled or trained that kind of elevated you to this elite status?
Well, I have to thank Shane Pestana because I came up as a front player. So, to me, paintball was because and I've been lucky enough to do some military training throughout the years with different types of force-on-force weapon systems. And it's different when you're playing for your life. But when you're playing paintball, you have the luxury of being aggressive. And it's hard because, that is not the easiest for everybody, to give your life away potentially or to incur some pain. And so it does take some players. I'm sure maybe if somebody listens to this, that this may resonate. Sometimes it's the opposite. Some people with paintball, they're too aggressive. So it's this fine dance that happens between those two things. And when I came up, I was, trying to be, and the group of guys that I was with, we were all, basically set on exerting our will aggressively against our opponents to have a certain style of play and to help, kind of, and that's just how the mindset was. So Shane Pestana came to me when we had this influx of a lot of front guys in like 99. And then actually it was probably 2000 when we won the title and the World Cup at the same time. And he had said, he's like, hey, Matty, because I just had a pretty good 99 and as a front guy, but he was like, I need somebody that has a really loud voice and that can play like a front player, but play from the back, and that sees the field well and can gunfight well. That's you. You have to do this job for us. Because at the time, some of the older guys on the Ironman were aging out, and we needed offensive-minded, gunfighting-centric, good communicators as a back player. And that phrase I just said describes the archetype of what you need to be as a good elite back player. And so we tried to go out and create that archetype. And so that's what it was. It's like you have to be able to have a big booming voice that carries, like, you listen to Yosh, bro, you can hear Yosh Rao. If Yosh Rao were to stand out in front of my house right now and yell, you would hear him 2 blocks down, bro. Like, he's got a huge booming voice. Mike Paxton, huge booming voice. Some people don't have booming voices, but their voice cuts and you can hear it and it's distinct. But you have to be able to communicate, and then you need to be willing and very down for the gunfight, because that's what you're supposed to be doing all the time. It's a little different now because there's a lot of lane holding and survivability issues with the way the layouts have been recently. There's not a lot of points to work with, but that's not how that shit was back in the day. So you kind of got to get out to a corner and dominate and be like an elite gunfighter. And then you have to be able to close games. And another important thing is you need to have the ability to shed the stress and the concern when you are in a bad situation. If it's 2-on-7 or 2-on-10, then you need to think, look, there's no reason, I have no business winning this. All right, well, let me play some jazz with this. Let's see what we can do in this situation. And so when you combine those mental elements, these are all mental things I'm talking about. Physical side of it's a little bit different, um, but yeah, those are the thing. That's kind of where the transition happened in the game from like a tactical and strategic standpoint. Because then you had these like LB Foul or Travis Szymanski, or I mean, even certain people moved back a little bit, played the twos, evolved the threes, those back players. That's what we call the third attacker essentially. But yeah, I mean, it's about being a front player that plays in the back and has the attributes needed to persevere and prevail against the best in the world. Sorry, I
So
got some long-winded ass
no,
answers, bro, but like
that's great.
this is
I love it. So it sounds like just being able to, exert your will in a nutshell, both among your team and against the opposing team, being able to exert your will in whatever situation, and it.
and close games. Like you have to look at it from so a lot of times you can't just go out into the back corner and like, pitch a tent, start a campfire, roast some marshmallows. I mean, you have to get out to that situation and think, okay, well, if somebody dies, you have to make that move forward. And then also, okay, how do we, what am I going to do? And there's not a lot of planning for that. You kind of just got to make it happen if you're in a bad situation to pull out games. But I mean, I feel like kind of how I made a lot of my name was, at least in the beginning, it was by being a front player. That's how I got on the Ironman. And then post 2000, it was by winning a lot of low body situations and being a really good gunfighter. So that's kind of, and then for that, I mean, I just love being in gunfights, man. Like that was fun to me. I mean, when paintball got monotonous, like when you're playing, because at one point we're playing like all the European events, all the MPPLs, all the NXLs. We're traveling, we're practicing, every weekend. I mean, you're like paintball completely consumes your life. Now, I mean, that was what we chose to do, and it was a great ride. But you kind of have to have a reason to do that. It's like I've said this quote before in different situations, and I never thought that Nick Diaz would be the poet, but Nick Diaz, UFC fighter, not known for being eloquent. But one time in the build up to a fight, and in a big fight, I think I can't remember who it was against, but um, he had said that he's like, they asked him, kind of what the game mean, or, what does fighting mean to him, and he said you need to you need to put yourself in a position where you're working so hard that you hate it. But in that hate, you will find something that you love and that makes you understand what it is about this thing that you're doing, that gives you another level of appreciation for it, and that's where the love is. So I used to love to get in the gunfights, man. Paintball gunfights, dude. So I would do that a lot. I mean, I would really focus on that because there's a certain interesting thing about dodging a moving a paintball is moving at you at 300 feet per second. It's about 200 miles an hour. They say that hitting a baseball is the hardest thing to do. Well, a baseball is, if it's an elite level major league fastball, it's going to have movement. It's going to be probably going at least 100 miles an hour, upper 90s, 100 miles an hour. Paintball is a fraction of the size of a baseball, and you have to dodge paintballs out there. So, that's a pretty exciting thing. And I used to love doing that.
Well, there's a lot of different aspects that goes into the game overall. Working with Colt Roberts this past year on his paintball Kumite stuff, it's been very interesting to kind of break down the different elements of the game. Like, I know your favorite part you said was to get into gunfighting. My personal favorite would be honestly shooting someone off the break. That's my favorite thing, is just being able to tell their snake player, hey, you don't get to play paintball at this point. Sorry, go back. Better luck next time. Yeah, that's and just those little aspects within the game itself is just so it makes the moments, and the moments are what we remember.
Well, have you ever seen the Quentin Tarantino movie? Well, it's Robert Rodriguez too, but From Dusk Till Dawn.
I have not.
So it's like a campy vampire horror slasher movie. It's pretty fun, but there's a scene in that movie where George Clooney. So it's George Clooney and Quentin Tarantino. They're the main characters, and I think they're brothers. Anyway, but it's a fun film. But in it, there's a scene where where George Clooney looks at the dude and he's like, he's got a revolver with 6 bullets in it. He's like, I got 6 little friends, and they all can run faster than you can. And so, we used to say that to the young little, anytime there'd be like a rookie front fast kid, and we go up to him and they're like, "Oh, hey, what's up, man?" I'm like, "Hey, man, you're running a 50 snake off the break, right?" And he's like, no, dude, I'm not running 50 snake." I'm like, "Come on, bro. I know the only reason you're on the team is because you're, 5 foot tall and you're blazing fast. So you're either going to the insert bunker or you're going to the snake off the break. And I got 1,000 friends and they all run faster than you can, bro. So try to make that spot smoke you, And it's like, because when we would go up to the older guys back in the day, and anyone that wants to go down the YouTube rabbit hole and just YouTube Larry Bird from Boston Celtics, bro. And the shit that this dude used to talk, he would get in people's heads all the time. Mike Jordan, same thing. Like, there's a mental aspect to it too, which, I'm sure we'll get into it a little bit, but like taking a microscope to things, that's what makes it interesting because, paintball has always had a harsh veneer to it. It's always been, and I think that over time, like us trying to make it more palatable to the masses has been a mistake because that's not what keeps us here. And, trying to appeal to soccer moms, like that's not who's buying. Yeah, sure, soccer moms. Dude, my mom used to run the dance program at UCSD. She's about as, she hates violence, hates guns. And, mid 90s when I went to her and I was like, I'm gonna go play paintball. She was like, okay, cool. She probably wanted me to get the hell out of the house and leave her alone. But it's like, it's a real thing, So it's yeah, man, the shit talking element of it that's part of it too.
I'm really curious to hear more about kind of the cultural side of paintball. I know you just mentioned how the industry as a whole has tried to make it more appealing to the masses over time. But those films that we just talked about that you were featured in a lot, they had a huge cultural impact. So tell us more about where paintball was culturally, like before all of these different films came out, and what kind of impact on the scene overall did they have?
Well, it depends on which one you're talking about. That's a pretty broad question. Because each one of those instances, whether we're talking about, they're all part of the same conversation, but, when Push was filmed, that was, late 90s. And then Sunday Drivers is early 2000s. A lot of change happened between 1998 and 2003. I mean, we literally, when I started playing professional paintball in 1994 at World Cup, that was my first event. And I was 16 years old. We were playing 25-minute games in the woods, and there were 72 10-man teams there. That's where paintball was at its pinnacle, the best of the best. Like as many people as we could get in one place. And then you fast forward, and then now we have, instead of there being 700 and let's call it 850 people. Then you go, and then in 20 years we're playing with, there's like 4,000 people at an event, so, and all the different divisions. Then you take the actual way the game is played. Huge fields, 10-man, 25-minute games. Then we go to, then you had hyperball, which is the, kind of sewer tubes essentially made into a fun paintball field. And then you had airball come out. So hyperball gets there like late 96, 97. We didn't really come into it until 98. And then airball kind of hits at that same time, 99, 2000, airball. And then X-Ball 2003, late 2002, 2003, which is a timed clock, like we have now, but it was a massive amount of time. I think it was like 20 or 25 minutes per half. And the guns, again, went from, like we discussed earlier, went from pump to 25 balls a second. That all happened in a decade. That happened in like 9 years. So we've now had to figure out what we're going to do with this untamable beast and try to sell it to the world. So again, that's like a 6-hour, 8-hour long conversation, bro, like 30-hour conversation. So, because there's a lot of intricacies in each one of those situations, depending on the people, the companies that made these things, the individuals that created these things, the people that played this game, their thoughts on it, how it all went down, the media involved, you know, I mean, there's been, because people are always asking me, they're like, oh, what, Matty, when is paintball going to go mainstream? I'm like, what does mainstream mean to you? Does that mean the NFL? Does that mean the UFC? Does that mean, like, what does that mean? Define mainstream to me. Because I found out about paintball by watching it on television in the early to mid 90s. I've personally worked on multiple television shows. We've had countless webcasts. It's been on like a shit ton of TV shows and commercials. There's been tons of different video games from different platforms and different creators. We've had, you know, decades now of this existence in the world with thousands of fields all over the world and millions of people that have played it. I'm like, what does mainstream mean to you, bro? So again, long conversation.
Well, kind of taking let's focus, I guess, a little bit then on specifically Sunday Drivers. Sunday Drivers was my personal favorite out of the three that I watched.
Wait, hold on, just real quick. So I don't mean to interrupt, but
go ahead.
This is interesting because you just watched Heroes for a Day, and then but you had seen Sunday Drivers and Push.
No, I binge watched all three of them on Saturday. I had never seen any of them, so that was first time viewing for me.
Hell yeah! Okay, cool. Well, give me your impressions of it then. This is interesting.
So for Sunday Drivers, of course, that was the film when I know you were talking about kind of the change in formats over the years. That was when 7-man and X-Ball were kind of side by side at that time. I felt like at least
hold on, sorry. Sunday Drivers, that was 10-man, but 7-man was there, but 7-man was like a European thing. Europe brought us 7-man. Europe brought us a lot of things. They brought us Hyperball, brought us Super Airball or Airball, and it also brought us 7-man. But right. Sunday Drivers was more kind of around I was 10-man because that was
okay. Let me make sure I'm going back in my photos that I took. There we go. Just to make sure I'm not mixing up the films just because I watched them all back to back to back. Yeah. See, no, Heroes for a Day. So Heroes for a Day was about, you know, transitioning into competing in the X-Ball format. And the thing that stuck out to me the most was just how, like, it, at least from our perspective, like none of the, you weren't trying to put on a pretty face for the cameras by any means. Like just immediately starting off with the conversation in the hotel room about, hey, these like all of you guys aren't going anywhere. But at the same time, like, hey, we got to figure this out. And that conversation kind of repeatedly going up and just how direct and how raw it was. But the interaction between like you, Rich Telford, all of the other players on that team. But again, that's from the perspective of someone who's been competing for a number of years and who's looking for kind of those changes, those small changes to make to go to that next level of playing. You know, that might be completely different to someone who has never like gotten into the competition side of paintball, or maybe has only ever played rec ball once or twice, or maybe has never even played it. But for me personally, I felt like that Heroes for a Day was like much more captivating. I don't know if it was because it purely focused on the Sacramento Excesses story, where some of the other films like kind of jumped around between 2 or 3 teams. But it was like getting to learn your story. And I know that Rich Telford was kind of featured way more in terms of like the later half of that movie and figuring out like, hey, what the direction of Excessive was, but like learning the stories of absolute legends, like players who were first ballot Hall of Icons, like yourself, like Rich, was just like, oh, why don't I know any of this? Like these are some of the top names in all of paintball. And I don't know if it's just because of the time gap, or if like overall we can do a better job of preserving that history.
You're from Texas.
Yes.
Right? Okay. Are you a sports fan?
Yes.
What's your favorite sport?
Oddly enough, hockey.
Okay. How old are you?
I'm 27. Turned 27 in
27.
February.
Okay. So what's your favorite hockey team?
Dallas Stars, and then after that, got to root for Vegas.
Okay. So in 2013, who were the best players on the Dallas Stars? And tell me everything you know about the drama that unfolded on that team.
I couldn't tell you anything. That was,
And that's hockey, right?
mhm.
So this is a problem because it's not it just it's not it just is what it is. It's not a problem, but this is kind of my problem because as one of the paintball storytellers and somebody that's been doing this for a long time. This is my 20th year calling paintball games. My first one was Huntington Beach, 2003. So constantly, it's like I'm just trying to get people to understand how cool a fucking story is, man, and tell the stories. But it's about the amount of stories told and how powerful those stories are. And because an event happens, this thing happens, and if you watched it live and it was really spectacular, then you personally could go to someone and say, man, you see your buddy at work or you talk to your brother-in-law at the barbecue and you're like, dude, unfucking believable what just happened, bro, last weekend. Did you see it? And then he may be like, yeah, I saw it. That was awesome. And if he didn't see it, maybe you sparked a light in one person. Now, if you watched this thing that happened and you wrote an article about it, or you did a podcast about it, or made a video about it, well, how well of a job that you did bringing to light the drama that actually was secondhand, you're the second step now to bring this thing into the world. And, how well did you do that job of bringing it to light? How cool was it to consume that piece of content that you created? How much did it resonate and reverberate in the person's mind so that they're going to concrete that shit in and care enough to tell someone else? Become a spoke on a content wheel to make people give a shit, and then take that to every single thing. So if you look at the history of sports, which you can see all these books here, like I'm a huge history nerd. So, it's really interesting how stories and the fire of an actual real life thing, whether that be in a battle or a company or a piece of politics or whatever, just some crazy human life that, it's like, I have some crazy family stories of how I'm even, here, it's like, so, keeping those stories going and then moving them on. So with sports, it's like with paintball. So this is one of the things and why I was so adamant. So like Heroes for a Day almost didn't even happen because when that was going down, we had other creators that were like, hey, we could do a video about you guys that would have been cheaper and way easier to kind of, because Patrick Sporer is a fucking genius. And at that point I'd work with him now, was a subject in Push and did the intro for Sunday Drivers. And then now we were doing Serial Killers at the same time. So I was working with Pat and I'm like, dude, Pat's the guy, we got to tell the story. And then and then also it's about, it's about having access to emotion, because if I can't watch something and experience an emotion in my mind watching that thing, then I'm not going to give a shit. And that's just the reality of the situation. So with Heroes for a Day, some of the people on the team were like, oh, well, we could do it cheaper and quicker with someone else that wasn't Pat. I'm like, no, dude, it's either Pat or we don't do it at all. And also, if we do this, everything has to be on the board. No story is untold almost. Again, not everything's for public consumption, but like we have to, like, let's document this. We're going to live this crazy life and do all this crazy shit and try this thing that we don't know if it's going to succeed. Like, we didn't know if we were going to build Excessiva to be a team that could beat Dynasty. It could have crashed and burned. And in the beginning, it definitely looked like it was going to. But you bring that to it and you're honest with it. And you take that into a little, nugget that you give to the world, and then people consume that and they either care or they don't care. It's that simple. Like, you have to create something that people have a visceral reaction. And this is not psychology, it's biology. It's how the brain works. It's literally how the brain is constructed. If you sit there and everyone's been there, anyone that's listening to my voice right now, when you're telling a story to somebody, if you have their attention or not. Are they looking at you in the eye? Do they care about the things that you're saying? If you stopped and said, what did I just say? Were they checking their phone? Were they checking the girl out at the bar over there? Were they watching see the score in the game? Or were they actually listening to and consuming your story? So like that's the type of stuff you have to put out in the world. And when you look at the stuff that has resonated over the years from a story standpoint, that's the stuff that sticks. It's called evergreen content, because anyone at any time, because they're a human being, can watch that and they can empathize with it and go, you know what? I can see myself in this, in one of the characters. So we need more of that. And we need more people that are willing to create and have the talent to create those things. So that's what we need.
Yep. And I think at least recently, and you're seeing this a lot in Texas, you're seeing more and more of those individuals that are starting to create more and more with the rise of media members like Verbal, for example, who's like at the top of the game now, really, in terms of creating content and publishing it out there. Just these little highlight moments of like either awesome plays or core samples or people overshooting each other on the field, but like memorable moments like that. And just with the rise of so many more media members, partly in thanks to like social networks and the shorts format kind of getting more and more popular, I think we're starting to get at least the moments here and there, but we'll see if that translates into more and more stories, because I think the most recent one that I can remember that did have that impact would be BKIT. And I would love to see more things like BKIT coming out on a more regular basis, because there's so many awesome stories out there in paintball.
But people need to give their support to this. Like where money flows, content grows. So if you care about this sort of stuff, then yeah, whatever you need to do to try to give those. Now it's different. Yes. And I've said this before and I'll say it again, but I call it the 5 fingers of the sports marketing fist. You have heroes. The reason why I call it this is because these different elements are different things. You're talking about highlights or a core sample. Like, if anyone's out there, do you remember a core sample or a highlight from 10 years ago? Like, tell me one highlight that happened 10 years ago. You may remember a story, or maybe someone's like Lasoya knocking a dude out. Like that. That's the type of stuff that will be evergreen. But people, because of the way our brains are constructed, we remember everything through story. Our entire lives that we tell ourselves, and there are lots of books about this, it's all through story. So that's how you captivate the human mind. So the 5 fingers of the sports marketing fist are heroes, history, the ongoing narrative, spectacle, and statistics. And those 5 elements form a fist to punch you in the face, to make you give a shit. And they're all different things. And they all enliven a different part of the brain. But all of those things, if you look at any solid piece of historical sports excellence, it's encapsulated in certain elements. So it's like when you're looking at, I'm a Padres fan. Tony Gwynn is a god in San Diego. We have a bronze statue to him, and rightfully so. And he walks on water out here. And the reason why is because when you look at his statistics, they were so good. Was he the flashiest player? No. In his later days, he was very portly. But he was a good dude. He had a great story. He played for San Diego State. He got on the San Diego Padres. He never left the team. He made like 15 All-Star games in a row. He could have gone 0 for 1,900 in the end of his career and still been a 300 hitter. Like, the dude was elite of elite of elite. Him and Ted Williams are the best hitters, average-wise, to ever pick up a baseball bat. So that there's different elements. He's a hero. We're talking about his statistics. He came from San Diego. He was a dual sport athlete at San Diego State. He was a All-American basketball player too, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So when you're creating content, if you're not thinking about these elements, then you're just throwing shit out into the world and hoping people that love it, that they love it. And God bless you. I hope they do. But you got to be, you really kind of have to look at, if you're going to build a house, you need to you need to kind of do some calculations and build a solid foundation. You need to put an amazing paint job on it. The wiring has to work, So again, these are all just different elements to it.
One of those elements that you talked about was statistics, and on this list of questions that I sent you, I'd like to actually skip around a little bit while we're on the subject. So, with your current position as the voice of paintball, as the main commentator for the NXL, one of the things that you are tasked with is kind of bringing up the the recent success, and even a little bit of statistics on your own during the events. So as far as the stats or the information that you have access to when it comes to the NXL events, like, is that all you? Do you have a team behind you that's able to provide you with some of those things? And how much research are you doing in preparation for these NXL events?
A lot of research. I have we definitely have a team, but the team is more broadcast oriented. I have some, I have a pretty decent list of other people that care, that know things, that will text me certain things. But as far as the statistical analysis of the situation, that's pretty much all on me. I don't have any interns. There's no one helping me with that at the event. Again, other than random texts from like, Quinn at Iconic or Vince at Let's Talk Paintball or whatever, different guys throughout the years. Used to have a guy named Cade. When we were at Paintball Access, I had a lot more help with it, but it's incredibly expensive to do paintball statistics. That still is that still is a plan. That's still something that we're at some point in time going to try to pull the trigger on. I don't have control over that right now, but it is, again, it's one of the fundamental important elements, because with statistics, when I sit there and, it's like, you can say, who's the best player ever? And in other major sports, we can say, oh, well, if you want to have that conversation in basketball, or you're a hockey guy, I'm not a hockey guy. We don't really have a hockey team growing up here in San Diego. But, baseball, football, it's like, well, Tom Brady with his Super Bowls, or, Dan Marino with his yardage, or, it's like, as we go through these different discussions, or, Ted Williams with Barry Bonds, but steroids, blah, blah, blah. But is this knowledge subjective, or is it objective? Is that my opinion, subjective, or is it objective? 2 and 2 is 4. So with statistics, it's important for me to be able to sit there and say, all right, well, Dynasty went first and first at the first 2 events. At the last event, they were, 29 points, 4 and 14 against, for a plus 15. That's like type of stuff I got to know, because it gives context to greatness, or context to mediocrity, or context to weakness. That's objective. So if somebody comes up to me and says, hey, we're underrated, or we're not rebuilding, or whatever, I can say, all right, well, let's talk about the numbers. Unfortunately, we don't have like the level of statistics that we want to get to, and that we had before. But that was just lighting money on fire before. That's another thing that paintball does really well, is lighting money on fire. But yeah, so what I'll do, and I kind of have an example of it here. So I can rattle these statistics off to you. Sometimes I will have them in my head, but because I have to do a lot of shows, I've kind of come up with my own system. So I'll go and rewatch the games, and then I will go and look at and I always keep my own paper. It's like, even when you watch Joe Rogan, he does the UFC, or Bruce Buffer, like, they don't read their shit off an iPad, bro. Like, they have paper notes. So sometimes people will look at my notes, including my wife. She calls them my tweaker notes. But but people will be like, oh, I could build a spreadsheet for you. I'm like, dude, fuck your spreadsheet, bro. Like, I've been doing this for a long time. I have it down to a science. Like, I can give a glance at a paper and know, what their last, what the last placings were, their number of overall points that they have ranked, their plus minus for the event, who they played, what the score was, all that sort of stuff. And I literally have that on a piece of paper, and I just create what looks like tweaker notes. But I've been doing this for a while, so I just can look at it and go, yeah, New York Extreme, they went 4th, and at the first one, and they went undefeated, and blah, I could just, because it's like that, I have to have this information, but there's so much going on all the time that I need access to it quickly. So, but yeah, I don't have a lot of help with that. So if anyone wants to intern, hit me up. That would be great, dude. I would love some help.
Stats is something that just amazes me. I have such an interest in it. And actually, during the COVID shutdown, just something that I did on my own time was just go and make a spreadsheet of all of the tournament finishes from the current iteration of the NXL. And with the originally, the intention was, hey, is there a correlation between sponsors and tournament finishes over X amount of time? But that quickly proved very difficult to obtain the information as far as sponsorships, but it was very interesting to see just the tournament finishes in general and stats such as like in the current iteration of the NXL up until last year, the only two teams that had never missed a Sunday was X Factor and Edmonton Impact. Everybody else had missed Sunday, including Dynasty, including Heat at one point or another. And just stats like that is cool to have, but it's also just so important. And I understand, like, with the current framework, how difficult it can be to get those stats and get them accurately. I know a couple of years ago, my FanWagon was doing the kill count tracker throughout the event, which I don't know how they managed to do that, but it seems like a very difficult thing to do, especially tracking kills off the break. But even being able to track simple, like what should be simple things like tracking how many points played does a player have and what's their plus minus on the when they're on the field. Those would be just two like kind of baseline stats that would really drive the narrative as far as like players and their impact on the game. Or like, hey, when, for example, when Tyler Harmon is on the field, there, what's the percentage of Houston Heat getting a kill off the break? Those stats would be so awesome to have and be able to just grab those narratives and just like make them plain. But
there's a couple difficult, well, there's a lot of difficulties there. First of all is the money. So so we have been involved in a lot of different incarnations of sports storytelling and these documentaries, and I worked for the magazines and worked with ESPN and the TV shows and blah blah blah. But with the stats, so when we started Paintball Access in 2012, I was like, we have to have statistics. So we spent $10,000 an event.
Oh, looks like we lost Matty for a quick second. Let's see if we can get him back. Give me just a second, y'all. I'm gonna go to a quick waiting screen. We'll get him right back in just a second, y'all. All right, sorry about that, y'all. Looks like we're back. Matty, I think the conversation we're having is just about like stats, and back in PB Access, you were spending $10,000 an event.
Yeah, so because think about it. Okay, well, we want to do stats. What do we need to do? So we worked our asses off, hired a crew, figured out how we're going to do it, created software, whole deal, and we had all these different metrics. It was prohibitively expensive. I mean, some of the webcasts that people are doing at Division, no disrespect at all, but I mean, some of those don't even cost $10,000. We did just the stats alone for like at least $10,000 an event, because to do it the right way, you have to have people on deer stands surrounding the field with the central hub. So you got to build an entire scaffolding. You got to fly like 8 dudes out there. You have to have software for it. It's all got to be updated live and pumped to us. And anyway, very problematic and difficult. So, but that's what it took. So we did that for a while. And so, that's what we're trying to get back to eventually here. And I think we can. But it's difficult. And again, it was never kills, it was confirmed kills. But all this stuff does is it just gives there's a fascinating book by Malcolm Gladwell called Outliers, and in it he has 3 different types of people that have basically, through their talents and skills, been able to change the world. And one of those people are mavens. So what we're trying to do when you're creating content is like, and I'm sure your podcast is this too. There's Texas Paint. What is a Maven? A Maven is somebody that gives a shit. They love it. They're passionate about it. They're, that paintball nerd. Again, there's so many different ways to describe it. But essentially, it's the person that has an intense involvement and passion for a specific activity. That's the definition of a Maven. And as creators, as prime movers to get story, well, you have the people that are living the story, then we put the story out there. The statistics give somebody ammo to make somebody care about it, so it's like, if you're talking, again, we don't know, really are ever going to know who the greatest ever is. It's always going to be an argument because there are no, yeah, we kept stats for a little bit. And again, we're trying to get back to there, but a lot of it is just the stats of wins. And then it's just, what did you see that guy do? Because some people will sit there and be like, Oliver Lang's the greatest ever. And then some people like, no, Ryan Greenspan is. And then some people like, well, no, it's going to be just, again, pick your hero, right? And then they will go, and then when you ask them to justify that, if it's not someone on, if it's somebody on Dynasty, then they're immediately going to go to just numbers of wins. They're going to be like, dude, Ryan Greenspan's won over 55 tournaments all over the world in his 20 years plus playing. And then, we have this intricate, fun conversation about that, but it's all just opinion, whereas if you have hard, concrete numbers, an objective measure of greatness with statistics, well, it's a different type of conversation because then we're having a more intricate and complex argument based on actual numbers, whereas now it's just like, oh, dude, I saw him pull off this like insane thing and it's super dope. And you're like, yeah, I mean, that's super dope, but does that make him the best ever? So, yeah, I mean, it's a fundamental part of it. Again, I think it's going to get back. I'm not in charge of it right now, but it's something that I'm really excited to see, to be honest, when we can get it.
That information would be great to have. I know, kind of in the realm of statistics, I think Iconic Paintball recently put out a list of players of all time and their all-time wins, all-time events played, things like that, which is great to see. But we would love to see more. Oh, hey there!
Hey, my son just walked in. Monty, say hi to everybody.
Hi.
Hi, Monty.
Can you say hi, bud? This is Matty Marshall. Hi, say hi to everyone. Okay, can you go to your mama?
All right,
bud.
So, no, that's all right. I'm an elementary school teacher for my day job, so I'm perfectly used to that. So this next question is brought to us by Airmis PB. Check them out at Airmis PB on Instagram. So along kind of the similar lines, one of the more recycled conversations in tournament paintball is about how we should be growing the sport, growing viewership, getting back on ESPN, things like that. So what are one or two things that you think either the paintball industry as a whole, or maybe more specific to broadcast or getting stories out, what are one or two things that we should be doing to help push us toward that reality? And however you want to define that reality, where you think that reality should be?
Yeah, I mean, we've talked already quite a bit about what I think that has to, because there's a lot of things that can exist, but it comes down to what can we actually make exist. And I think the most, there's just so many different ways to go with this. First of all, though, I'd have to say that, and getting it on TV is not like, we've been on TV, man. Like that's not the cavalry coming over the hills to save us. I know maybe because we haven't been on TV in a while, but especially the way that TV is now, like, bro, like things have changed. The media landscape has completely changed. So getting it on TV is not going to save paintball. Not that paintball needs to be saved. Again, paintball's looking as good as it's looked since the mid 2000s. If you look at tournament attendance at the really big events, the strength of the regional events, and I mean, it's also, it's something, then this is a question I would ask people. I'm like, man, like, I love this. Obviously, look at the life I've led, but I mean, how much, I also think we have to get back to, I don't think, look at the UFC. Like, the UFC didn't get on, on everyone's radar as something that became $1 billion, there, and paintball there's a lot of money in the playing of it and the manufacturers of the stuff and all that sort of shit. But Because, the UFC didn't reach the zeitgeist of people's attention by being super vanilla. That's the exact opposite. I mean, if you look at the story where Dana White, so I mean, are you a UFC fan at all?
I was for a little bit, not so much nowadays.
So there's a fascinating story based on what we're kind of talking about, where so Dana White, um, he was being asked why, so that this fighter was being inducted into the UFC Hall of Fame. His name's Stephen Bonner. And Stephen Bonner had a relatively mediocre career as a fighter. But, and most importantly, he fought against Forrest Griffin in the first Ultimate Fighter. And at the time, the UFC was about to go bankrupt. And so they kind of threw their last Hail Mary in the hole, like $4 million or something. And I may be, butchering these statistics, but people can go look up this story because it is a real story. And so they're asking him, like, why does Stephen Bonner get to be in the Hall of Fame, man? Like, look at his record. It was trash. Again, I'm using statistics. Like, why should this guy be in? And Dana White goes heavy with the story. And he goes, look, man, here's the deal. If Stephen Bonner didn't go to war with Forrest Griffin in the final of the Ultimate Fighter finale and then cause us a huge rating spike, and these dudes beat each. I remember I watched it live. These dudes beat each other to hamburger meat. Like, I mean, they just beat the shit out of each other, man. It was an amazing fight. At the time, one of the best fights I'd ever seen. And he's like, if it wasn't for Stephen Bonner, the UFC might not even be here. So I make the decisions, and Stephen Bonner's in the Hall of Fame. And sitting there as a lifelong UFC fan, watching it since UFC 1 when I was a kid, and I was like, hell yeah, dude, he should be in the Hall of Fame. Because there would be no fame for the rest of these dudes or money for anybody if that guy hadn't lived that story live in front of people and then put his body on the line to do it and lost the fight because Forrest Griffin won that fight. So anyway, so paintball needs to exist as the thing that it is. This is an intense thing. The more we look at it as this benign experience that anybody can do. Now, can anyone play paintball? Absolutely. Like, dude, anyone can play paintball. I mean, especially with all the variations of ways to play it now, or some sort of force on force. I mean, hell, you have like Nerf guns and the gel strike guns, which are super fun as entry level, and the 50 cal. Like, we didn't have that back in the day. Like, it was grown ass construction workers and mean ass old men, 35 years old, cranking their guns up, shooting us, into the ground. Like, that's what we had when I came up. Not to be that like salty old dude, but it is an intense thing. It's not going to be for everybody. And so to get random people who will never play paintball be fans of paintball, you have to entertain them. And we're not going to be entertaining them by showing them, a sport that doesn't have some visceral hook to it. And I'm not saying we have to turn it into the WWE, but if you look at, because people are like, oh, paintball is an extreme sport. I'm like, yeah, it definitely is. It's super crazy, man. I mean, you're playing war out there, dude. Like, we're gunfighting, and it hurts. But in the mid 2000s, when paintball was kind of catching that and money was being pumped into it, and to be honest, lit on fire, no one was making any of this money back. So a lot of people are like, oh, the golden age and this and that. I'm like, do you know how many millions of dollars were lost by people chasing this? Like, it's a giant funeral pyre of money that that was spent on that, for no return. For not everyone, but for a lot of them. And in the meantime, it's like it's like half the time dudes can't even argue out there. And I used to fight this fight with the PSP back in the day, now defunct PSP, but for a while it was getting to the point where these refs were like, a dude would get pissed, say, the F word, and then hit a bunker, and he'd like get a major penalty. I'm like, what are we doing out here? This is paintball, bro. Like, really gonna pull a penalty on a dude for getting mad at himself and punching a bunker and then cussing? Like, does that happen in any other pro sport? No, it doesn't. I mean, I love baseball. I mean, at least a couple times a month, there's like a benches clearing brawl in baseball, So again, you have to let it be what it is. You can only take so much away from it before either people don't want to play it in its current incarnation. I'm not saying that's what's happening right now. Obviously, there's a lot of people playing it, but we're asking people to watch this and be entertained. So it's an extreme sport. No one's leaving in a stretcher. there's no crazy like insane laws of physics being defied by backflips. This is not a board sport. So what do we have? Well, again, this is why statistics are going to be important, because we have to have that objective measure of greatness in a skill set that, especially with the way things are going now, we've had these very tactical games, low scoring games for a little bit, which I enjoy watching, but it's like it's like you watch a UFC fight. Well, some dudes just want to show up and watch dudes get punched in the face, and the second it goes to the ground, they get super bored, checking their phones. They don't give a shit. So it's like, well, okay, my question would be like, what do we have to offer to the world? Well, we have really captivating stories. We have to tell those stories, because the actual spectacle itself, even though we love it and we know what we're watching, like, dude, again, where is the spectacle? Like, you watch a car race, you're watching F1, you're watching NASCAR, watching baseball, dude's getting a 100-mile-an-hour fastball thrown in his head. Dudes are walking out in stretchers, not in stretchers, but they're going to the hospital after they get in the head. So it's like, where's that in paintball? Like, again, it used to be so gnarly that dudes would be getting in fights and pushing each other. There was like an emotional element to that, but we've taken that out of the game a little bit. I'm not saying we have to add that back in, but I would ask you, where is the draw? What's the draw? If you were king of ESPN and you look at paintball, what's the draw to you? Like, what will we be pushing?
I mean, you gotta either push, like, for example, right now in the sport of paintball, you could go a couple different ways. Like, for example, you could cover Dynasty's kind of historic run that they're in the middle of. You could be focusing on the other, like, more exciting moments. Like, for example, we had two standoffs that happened in the previous season with like Dylan Boyum, and then I think there was another one with one of the players on Tampa Bay Damage. Those little moments that draw eyes, they draw viewership, they draw clicks. But as those little moments would be more of like a, hey, this might be good for like a top 10 or not top 10 reel on ESPN. But as far as like drawing in like viewership for the bigger overall stories, and not just like drawing eyes, but like keeping people vested, I think you just have to go back to like the overarching stories over the course of a season or multiple seasons, like really focusing in on Dynasty's run right now, or focusing on like, why isn't it working for Diesel with their super team? Things like that, which granted, I don't have any insight into the industry or like doctrines behind those, like drawing in viewership or creating storylines. But for me, and granted, again, this is like from someone already in the scene, how to draw people from completely outside of the scene. It would just like, hey, give me someone to care about, and give me why I should care about them.
100%, bro. That's what I'm talking about. But the other issue is that sometimes, what we have to do is, because paintball doesn't have a car crash, and we may think, because we love the game, that run through, that could be a car. That's not a car crash. That's not a car crash. I'm sorry. It's not. It's not. So let's just agree that it's not and move on. That's going to have a certain effect on people that love the game. The only way we can go with this, we have to get statistics back, and we have to cover teams that will have literally, like, as again, not everything's for public consumption, but as much as possible. And those people would have like a camera crew with them, and then we would have some sort of ongoing narrative that you could follow. That's the way forward. We have to do that. And again, it's like, this isn't rocket science, dude. Like, this is just, you're literally being like, yeah, dude, Heroes for a Day was dope. Yeah, why? Because we had a camera guy following us around like the entire time, and we're totally okay with letting the dirty laundry get out there. Oh, dude's crying. Cool, that's what it is. All right, we gotta fight for your spot on the squad. Cool. And I mean, even working on that project too, I mean, like, there was that could have been an amazing like docu-series. We had to turn it in, just with the way that media worked back then, we had to turn it into like a 2.5 hour long movie that at the time people were like, oh, it's too long. Well, people are still talking about it 20 years later, so it must have worked out. So that's what I'm saying. It's like all of the stuff that people have come to me and been like, Matty, this was dope. This was awesome. Good job. whatever that may be over the years, whatever it was, it always is, it has some sort of realistic emotional microscope to the moment. It has an artistic way of bringing that moment to light. And that combo is, again, an evergreen piece of content because it resonates, because it makes people give a shit, dude, because it's real. So it's like we have 20 pro teams, and there's 200-ish pro players, and I spend a lot of my time. This is what I do, like I'm like, hey, this is amazing, please listen. Well, we only have so many resources, so it's like, but that's kind of, that would be the next step. That's the next step, because people are like, we need an F1, we need a
Drive to Survive. Yep.
We need something like that, right? And I'm like, okay, cool. Well, first of all, that cost a shit ton of money to make, which, again, we could do something low budget for it, but it's like, sometimes you'll have conversations with like somebody that owns a company, and they'll say, oh, I want like Red Bull type marketing. I'm like, okay, well, are you willing to spend 50 to 60% of all of your revenue on marketing? Oh, you're not? Okay, then, well, what conversation are we having then, bro? Like, you're not gonna get, what are we talking about? Like, I love that this is, having worked with a lot of these different producers and people that have created things over the years. I think it was it was a TV show called The Network, but it was like Jane Fonda was playing the person that owned the media conglomerate, that were billions and billions and billions of dollars are at stake. And she's having this conversation with the anchor, who was having a, like a moment of moral crisis. And he's like, no, we need to talk about this, this, and this. And she's like, did you ever hear the story about Moses and Jesus playing golf? And he's like, no. And he's like, well, have you heard this story before?
Nope.
So, do you play golf at all?
No, unfortunately,
Okay, well,
I've not been blessed with a good back to be able to do that lately. But
so I didn't start playing golf till I was older, and I hated it when I grew up because I thought it was boring. But it's incredibly difficult. It's actually probably arguably the most difficult thing to do from like a sports standpoint, which is ironic because the ball's literally sitting at your feet, laughing at you. Like, you should be able to make an athletic swing to hit this ball to make it go where you want to go. But this is a telling story, because in this you have Jesus and Moses. And Moses gets up and he puts his ball down and he hits a nice little shot there, and it hits on the green, and he's like close to a birdie. Jesus gets up and he hits his ball, and it goes into this river, and then a fish picks it up, and the fish swims the ball down, and then a hawk comes by and grabs the ball, and then he lands it, and then a snake comes out and he pushes the ball and it drops in the hole. And Jesus looks at Moses and goes, what do you got now? Hole in one. And Moses looks at Jesus and he says, are we going to fuck around, or are we going to play golf? So that's my question. It's like, are we fucking around, or like we playing golf, dude? Because if you're playing golf, you're not kicking the ball with your foot. You're not dropping it over here. Like, it's hard, dude. It's really difficult because you have to play it where it lies. No matter what happens, no matter what the situation is, raining, it goes on a tree, like you're fucked, dude. If you're in a bad spot, you got to make it happen. And so that's kind of my question, is that, having done this with so many people throughout the years, and it's so easy to sit on the sidelines and be like, we should do this and we should do that and we should do this and we need this and we need this, and it's like, and I'm not saying you're doing that, but because you have a podcast, you're telling stories. You're part of the solution. So my question is, like, are we gonna fuck around, or are we gonna play golf, man? Like, are we gonna, do we want to tell some stories? Let's tell some stories. If you're on a pro team and you want paintball to be bigger, well, guess what? We have to have a camera in that meeting when you're weak and you're losing and you're crying, and your life is in shambles because your girlfriend just left you. You have no money in the bank account and you're stoked to get the gun to sell. Why? Because that's a fascinating story, and people will always remember your struggle, and they will look back 20 years from now and be like, dude, that was amazing. I mean, there's a story with Heroes for a Day where, we went and did the screening, and I brought Nicky Cube up. He was my roommate at the time, and I love Nicky Cuba. And he watched himself crying in that meeting, and we drive back, and he's like, Daddy, I don't know if I want that in the video, Like, I don't know if I want that in. And I was like, he's like, because that's a moment of weakness. And I had said to him, I understand, But you gotta, at the end of this, this is 2 years after that had happened, and he becomes the hero. And I said, you have to understand, man, if you let us put this in the movie, you will not only will be a hero to the people that watch it at the time, but for generations of paintball players, because they're going to be able to go back and see you have that moment of weakness and then become one of the most clutch dudes to ever play the game in that time period. Like between 2006 and late like 2009, Nicky was one of the first guys out for every team he played, helped the Ironman win a bunch of tournaments. So he literally turned his entire game around from being the least clutch guy and the guy that we could not count on because he would do dumb shit and die early by being too aggressive and not thinking through things. And he ended up being the most clutch dude. And that defined his career because at the end, you could always count on Nicky Cuba to hold it down. And we saw that. And in any movie that you watch, there's a 3-act structure. And you can see the hero change. And if you can't see the hero change in a real life thing, then it will not have the same emotional effect. And there was other stories we could have told, but that was the most powerful one. So that's where we went with it. And, God bless Nicky Cuba that he was willing to have a personal moment in public and give that to the world, And then we need more of that because most people don't want that. Most people don't have the strength to do that. So that's what I'm saying. Are we going to fuck around or are we going to play golf? Are you going to be willing to, can we put a camera in your meetings? Or are you going to be like, oh, we can't talk. No, I turn the camera off. Can't talk about this. Like, if paintball wants to be big, if we want more people to care about paintball because we don't have car crashes and we don't have people doing double backflips over stuff, we need more of that. And I
Absolutely.
need more creators that are willing to do that. And I need more pro players that are willing to have access to that. That's what we need.
I think that we're starting to get back to that. I do think that one team that has actually done a better job in kind of moving us closer towards that is Austin Notorious, the newest pro team. They recently had, I think, part one of I believe it's a multi-part series that's going to be coming out in collaboration with Maxed or with Virtue, where they're covering kind of their story. One of the things that they covered was, hey, who was Diego Soto, who was this player that was so important to them, that came up with them in their divisional ranks and then tragically passed away 2 years ago. And being able to cover those stories, like, it moves us closer towards like giving us the people to care about. And one of the conversations I was having with Matt the Gym Rat a couple of weeks ago was, how do we draw these storylines? What can teams do to kind of get their own stories out, give us more people to care about? Because as it stands right now, as far as like, and let alone storylines, just like teams putting out anything at all, you've got Notorious, you've got Ronnie Dizon with the Dizon Docs, you've got the Spick and Span show, you've got Play the Game podcast, and then like you can say BKIT, but even that was several years ago. Like, other than that, you're not really seeing anything coming out from the teams. And like watching, like all we get is what's on the field for the Go Sports broadcast. And I would love to care about more of these teams.
Yeah, I mean, we've been trying to do, we had defining moments, and it's just tough to put. That's the thing. Like, dude, also Heroes for a Day, that took like 2.5 years to make, dude. Like, this is what I'm talking about. Like, are we fucking around playing golf? Like, it's really hard, and it takes a certain type of talent to put out really good content. And to do that with any sort of speed or regularity is incredibly difficult, especially if it's story-based content that's like that's hard. So yeah, but I mean, anything's better than nothing, So and God bless everyone that's doing all this stuff now. And I honestly, I really do truly think, and I feel that you could back this up just by what we're seeing, is that I mean, again, COVID, with people like, what are we gonna do? So Ryan and Kyle Spick are like, oh, well, let's have a podcast, and then and it's super fun, and then you have Marcelo and Tyler, and then you have Carl Markowski's been doing his thing. You're on episode 50, and then all of a sudden, I mean, bro, I've been here for a long time. This is my 20th year just calling paintball games. I've known all the media people for 30 years, because I was on the pro teams before that, So it's like I've never seen this many vibrant individuals coming up to me like, Matty, let me talk about this, and let me talk about that, and what do you think about this? And I'm like, this is overwhelming, but also great, So I do think we are heading into a bit of a golden age for content. But again, my challenge is to the creators is that try to find subjects that are willing to give you access. Because when I sit down with like and I've, we've done a ton of shows with our, Go Sports Live and interviewed a ton of people. We have like 150 shows, but it's like when I sit there with Patty Gleason, it's like, dude, I mean, Patty's talking about his former drug use and being an addict, and now he's this fitness guru, and it's like, what a fascinating story, dude. Like, you're an asshole if you're not a fan of Patty Gleason. Like, it's such a fascinating story. So I would just say, yeah, man, the more people that are creating really cool stuff and taking a microscope to the emotional side of things and then giving that to the world, because the paintball stuff's there. Obviously, you have to capture all that. But that's the easy part. Going out to the field and getting those angles. Like, I think so much emphasis is put on like getting this super dope slow-mo you can put in a reel. Again, that's awesome. It's needed. But that's just one part of the fist that we need to get people to give a shit. We need more. We need more stories. We need more people that are willing to tell their stories, honestly. And it's like, it's just hard though. I've been there, man. It's the humbling thing when you fail and there's somebody there capturing that failure. But that's life, dude. Like, I mean, it's, one of the things I love about paintball is how hard it is. Like, I grew up playing baseball. I played football too in high school a bit, and then fell in love with paintball. But baseball's really difficult. If you can do the thing you're supposed to do at bat well 3 times out of 10, 300. You'll be in the Hall of Fame and you'll be making $25 million a year. Like, that's how hard that is. And so paintball is also difficult because unless you have played in San Diego Dynasty for the past 20 years, those wins are rare. I mean, ask Damage how rare a win is. Ask Heat right now how hard it is to win a paintball tournament. It's at the professional level. Ask any of the divisional shit. Fit, it's so impressive with what you guys do in Texas. Which we should probably get to before I got to go. But
oh yeah,
it's really, really hard to win a paintball tournament. It's hard. It's humbling. This is a difficult thing. A lot of times in paintball, when you do the right thing, you get punished physically. You may make the right move and get shot 15, 20 times. And you'll do it again the very next point. So there's a specialness. There's a certain special thing that exists in that little beat of time. And so that's awesome. But that's not enough, man. That's just part of it. And so we have to do extra work with paintball because we don't have knockouts. In the UFC, when you watch that or any mixed martial arts thing, that's why jiu-jitsu is not as popular as mixed martial arts, because no one leaves on a stretcher. No one's getting knocked unconscious. You may get choked unconscious, but at the high level, that just doesn't happen that much. That's why a lot of people watch, car racing, but, you innately want to see the gory reality of that anyway. But so we have to work extra hard as paintball media people, and those stories have to be told. That is the only way forward. And anyone that wants to argue with that with me, please give me some more information. Like, what else on our spectacle can we cover that would, get it to be more popular? Because I just don't see how that is going to work. We've changed the format. We've had 3-man, 5-man, 7-man, 10-man, woods ball, hyperball, airball. We've done timed things. We've done race 2. We've done, like, we can change the format all we want. But at the end of the day, if you're not telling a human story that people give a shit about, then no one really wants to watch, because no one's hitting a ball 450 feet. No one's getting knocked unconscious. Cars are not cartwheeling down the asphalt. Like, where's the spectacle? Is it a dude diving into a bunker? Is it a lane being shot in slow motion? Is it a dude being shot 15 times? Like, that's not the same type of spectacle. It's not, the death is not prevalent in that conversation. Death is prevalent in these other conversations. So we have to work harder on a story standpoint to get people to give a shit.
for sure.
And anyone that wants to argue, I'll argue. Let's argue. But give me some information, like, please enlighten me as to what I'm missing, because I don't know what it is.
Oh yeah. For anybody who's looking for a story, I strongly suggest going back to an episode that I did with Jaron Sherman of Austin Notorious, and he laid his whole story out. Like some of the things that he talked about was like, selling everything and moving to Oregon so that he could start his own hemp farm. And then how that business, like he started subleasing it to another tenant who had secretly like not told him about losing their license and then getting raided by the FBI. So he goes back to this property that he's put his whole life savings into, and it's completely trashed. So like just stories like that, that's one I will recommend for anybody who's looking for a story, especially for someone in the pro division right now.
Oh, that's amazing. You got me. Like, holy shit. I want to know what happens next. Like how does he do? So that's, because again, we're human, man. Like that's a human story. That's fascinating. So
For sure.
We got to dive more into that. That's something that's key. I mean, and I'm jaded because I love watching dudes shoot paintballs at each other. I think it's super fun. I do enjoy I wake up Sunday morning stoked to see how it all turns out. So, but it's also fascinating because it's like, and I've told this story on different podcasts before too, but it's just the way it is. I mean, my wife, she loves me, and God bless her for her support, and letting me do paintball and stuff. But I mean, it is my job. But at the same time, over the years, she doesn't really, not gonna like watch paintball games, but she'll be like, oh, how did Dynasty do? Oh, how's Thunder doing? Because we went up to Matt Chim's wedding and she met Corey, so she'll just be like, oh, how's Corey doing? How's the team? What team is he on now? Oh, he's on the Ironman. How are they doing? Like she has an emotional vested interest in certain individuals over time. And I remember, another Nikki Cuba story, but one of the first 24/7s that happened was a HBO show to hype the fight between Floyd Mayweather and Ricky Hatton. They were both undefeated at the time, and I was super stoked to watch this documentary because I love boxing. And so show up at the time, like Nikki, Yosh, Indian John, like a bunch of Dynasty guys that lived there, and Nikki lived there with them. Skinny Kevin, I think, lived there at the time. So I roll over to watch this documentary. And at the time, Nikki's girlfriend is like, oh, hey, Matty, what's up? How you doing? I'm like, oh, good. She's like, what are you coming over for? I'm like, oh, we're going to watch this cool documentary. You should watch it. It's about boxing, and it's, Floyd Mayweather and Ricky Hatton. He's an English guy, blah, blah, blah. And she's like, oh, I hate boxing. I would never watch that. I'm like, okay, cool. Didn't give it a second thought. Go in. We watch the first episode of it. I leave. Now, fast forward about a month and a half later, and I go to the bar to, pay my $20 to watch the fight with the other 300 people coming in to pay $20. Why are they paying those $20? Well, about to find out, because here comes Nikki's girlfriend. And I'm like, what the hell are you doing here? You hate boxing. And she goes, yeah, I hate boxing, but I just really want to see Floyd Mayweather get his ass kicked. And I was like, oh, she watched the story, and now she has an emotional vested interest. And even though she hates boxing, why is she here paying $20 to get in with the other flock of people coming in to pay $20 for the story? That's why people pay money. They pay money for a story. So we have to go that route, bro.
Absolutely. And I do want to kind of get back to your story as a player before we kind of wrap things up here. So as a player, and I know we talked about all of the different formats that we've been through over the years, 10-man, 7-man, X-ball, race of 2, time formats, 25-minute halves. For you personally as a player, did you have a favorite format to compete in, and what was it that made it your favorite?
They're all fun in different ways, and to be honest, my favorite way to play paintball is not any of the competitions. I did that because I wanted to seek out a certain level of adventure. I wanted to play the best in the world, and I want to see how good I could do. But I'm like, if you're asking what my favorite thing to do is in paintball, it's to load up my autococker with as much paint as I'm willing to carry out into the woods and go play a big game that's between ideally we want to have like maybe 250 on 250, maybe a little bit bigger. Because to me, that's like, and the metaphor I use for this is that it's like a surfer surfing a big wave. So it's like when you're really good at paintball and you go into a big game, it's the different level of experience. It's like, yeah, I can like dig out. Well, maybe not anymore because I'm fat and old. But like, you dig out to a corner and you dive into a spot and jump up or slide into a spot. And now you're locked into a gunfight with this one guy, and then you got to put him in a wrap around, shoot one more dude. It's like and there's 5-on-5. That was cool because it was very distilled, and that one guy that I'm gunfighting is one of the best in the world. And if I can beat him in a gunfight and put him into his bunker and wrap around and shoot his boy without him knowing, like, all right, cool. That's a good day. That's a good point. So there's a certain level of fulfillment in that risk versus reward situation. But I'd done that for a long period of time in my life. So I started, you wanted to seek out like different types of fights. And, even like I'd never really played. I played a lot of woods ball growing up because that's where the best played. But then I started actually getting I was sponsored before the Great Recession. I was like sponsored by Smart Parts and whatever. I was like barely getting enough to like kind of go. And I was going to start this website. And again, this is like before all these companies went out of business. But so I started playing these big games, and it was just so pure, bro, because it's so fun because you can go out and shoot 50 people, bro. Like that's not an exaggeration, So it's like if you and 10 dudes are really good, you can literally go out and take on 100. Like we did this one game one time where it was like 10 on 100 at some castle place in the East Coast, and I mean that still to this day is one of the most memorable. It's like Oliver, me, Nikki, I think Mr. U was there. I think Alex Frazier was there. Like we had this like Lion's Den like straight murderer's row of 10 that we maybe had 12, and it was against 100. So it's like once you've done a certain level of accomplishment, it's like what's next. So yeah, I mean, I literally could sit here and tell you like, dude, I love 10-man. 10-man's so pure too. I loved playing X-Ball too because it was so hard, because it was very, very, very intense. So I mean, you're just like mainlining the paintball experience in, playing playing X-Ball as it is now. These are all different types. That's why I always say when we do shows, I'm like, hey, whatever you're doing with paintball, you're welcome and have a good time. There's so many different ways to do it. 1-on-1 to 4,000 on 4,000, or however many you can get. And I've been on some of those like, big games where there were 4,000 people out there. Got a lot of crazy stories there too. So I don't know, man. They're all different levels of special. It just so I know that's not really like a committed answer. I would probably, if I had to pick one format to play forever, it would be 10-man. Just because, I mean, even if you're playing 10-man on an airball field, there's just more to it. It's are we playing chess with 5 pieces each, or are we playing chess with 10 pieces each? So that was as somebody likes to think about the game and like put the puzzle pieces together as it was being played, it was just more fun because there's more variables to it and it was more exciting. So I would have to pick 10-man. But I had some really intense experiences playing X-Ball in its origin years, and then 7-man sweet because it's like a nice mixture between the two. But this is a problem, is that this is a problem paintball's had. It's like, oh well, what's the format, But they're all sweet in different ways, man.
For sure. And I mean, big games are just as valid of an experience. That's one thing that I have not been able to check off just yet. But I've always heard stories, and definitely something that I need to go to, especially because we have one, here in Texas with Greg Pauly's field. So it definitely would be an experience to go to. So
you got to do it the right way, though, bro. Like the whole point of a big game is you got to go with some good friends and some good paintball players, and then run as a crew. Try not to go out, like try to wait. Even if you have to come back and wait for them to come back, like wait and then go out together. Because it's so easy to get lost in a big-ass, huge fight, and then you won't have as much fun with your buddies. And also you won't have as much effect on what the game is. And then also, which I mean, it's not like again, it's not rocket science, but you would all like, because like the general would come up sometimes as we came in. They're like, "Oh, Matty, we need you to go and get this box over here or do this because we need these points." And I'm like, "No, bro. Like, where's the biggest fight? Like, we're going towards like, where's the front? That's we want to go to the front so you can hear it almost like you can hear it in the distance. You're like, oh, that it sounds like it's going off over there, and then just go right into the biggest fight you possibly can in a place that where there's movement, which is why certain fields on the big game thing, like Hell Survivors in like SC Village is good because there's a lot of stuff you can do there, different types of terrain, and they have different fields in Southern California. Hell Survivors in Michigan was amazing because there was so many, like that field's been there for 30 years, so they built up so much stuff. Like when you can make small moves, 10 20 people can destroy 150 200 people, like legit, and it's pretty amazing. One-on-one's pretty cool too. Like Hormesis, and they're doing a one-on-one tour here this summer, and been working with Oliver talking about that for a little bit, and that's a cool thing too. And the way that they're doing the joust is so they have like the duel and the. Have you heard about this at all?
Yes, and I'm actually signed up for both the joust and the duel when it comes to Paintball Fit.
Dude, you're gonna love it. So it's still new, so I'm trying to see how it's gonna play out, but I just love the concept of the joust. And I sat in my backyard with Oliver, and we kind of talked through the joust last year and what it should look like and kind of the vibe of it. Because the duel is the duel is it's a duel. I mean, it's you got a gun and I got a gun, and who's the best? The joust is a bunch of duels within the framework of like a bigger fight where you're supposed to get involved as like a fan of your buddy and your teammate that's going out there. So you have like a teams of like it could be up to 50, it could be 30, could be 10, could be 5, whatever, but and then you got a general or a coach, but we're calling him the general, and then the general is deciding, playing the chess match essentially. So as the soldiers, you got to just like wait for your turn and get out there and win when you can. And so it's kind of interesting. I'm interested to kind of see how that ends up playing out, because that's an interesting spin on like a teamwork version of a one-on-one. And Oliver's awesome and a genius, so this is going to be super sweet to see. But everyone should make it out if you can to one of those.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely looking forward to it when it comes. I think the one at Paintball Fit's the end of July, so hope to have some fun playing in that. I was a little bit sad that I had missed out on the Ultimate Shootout when Go Sports was at Fit 2 years ago, or I guess 3 years ago now. Yeah, 2.5 years, something like that. It was in between Vegas and Cup, and in the it seems like the one summer where the weather was actually a little bit more manageable. It wasn't in the 120s like it sometimes is, like it might be this summer.
Well, COVID gave us, well, at least the world gave us a little bit of a break. I had to drive out to Texas twice for that from San Diego because we didn't know what we were going to do with COVID. And I mean, there's been a ton of, one-on-ones there's lots of different ways to do one-on-ones. But I do think that like a well-run one-on-one league could be very beneficial to the sport of paintball, which is what Oliver would like to achieve with the duel and with the joust. So I'm pretty excited about that. And I think it's going to be, it's going to be fun, and it's going to be challenging. Which is the whole point we do this. It's why, that's kind of like why I do love the Hormesis dudes and kind of the whole concept, because, it's like, I've always hated the name paintball just because, like, yeah, we shoot balls filled with paint at each other, but that's not really what this is. That's just a description of the bullets or the projectiles that we use to do this thing. I always thought something like Battle Ball would be more appropriate because that's kind of what it is. And so with like the concept of Hormesis, again, I don't own the company, but these are my good friends and I do respect what they're doing. But that's the gift of the game. You go do something really difficult and you learn a lot about yourself and about other people, and you create a very harsh, and sometimes hellscape almost for your mind, but only for a very brief amount of time. And because most people lose a lot more than they win. And again, it's it's a very hard place to be mentally. And so what does that do? It builds a resiliency into humans, and we need as much of that as we possibly can in this day and age. So yeah, dude, like, I think it's going to be cool.
Oh yeah. Definitely looking forward to it. Real quick, I see a lot of people in the chat giving some love. Yeah, Colt Roberts just came into the chat not too long ago. He says, the man, Matty Marshall. Colt, thank you again for all of this, man. It's been a blast so far. So, Matty, this next question is brought to us by FUAthletics, which is one of my teammates, Thomas, who's also on the Texas Titans, does athletic wear and donates back to cancer research with all of his purchases. So, go to thefuathletics.com, use code inthepits25 for 25% off of your order. So throughout all of your different moments in your playing career, do you have a single favorite moment?
Yeah, I think it would have to be, even though I didn't have to do much in this game, but who cares because of what happened. But yeah, I think when we won in 2000, because no one had ever won the series title and the World Cup at the same time. That had never been done. It's been done since. But when we were with the Ironman, and I kind of reflecting through the moment now in my mind, and kind of that whole day. But yeah, so I think winning the series title and the World Cup when we just beat the brakes off Aftershock in that last game, and Oliver shot like 6 dudes. I didn't even have to shoot anybody. It was great. And I always had said, I was like, it would be really cool to win the series title and win the World Cup and know that you won it, so that you can celebrate on the field as it actually happens, and that that's what went down. So I got to do that, so that was pretty tight. So that would probably be my favorite moment. Oh, Jesus Christ, dude! There's a lot of really good moments.
I'm sure you have plenty to choose
winning
from.
with Joy Division in Europe was dope, because at the time no one was bringing American mercenaries over, and Maggot Iris, the dude who ran Joy Division at the time, had hit me up after we won that title, and for the next year he was like, "Hey, what do you think about bringing over? You come over and then bring like 2 Ironman players, and we'll bring you guys over each event." He's like, "I still got to talk to Di and work it out from like the sponsorship standpoint, but what do you think?" And I was like, "That's genius. I would love to come play in Europe and do that." So, and then we ended up winning Brighton Beach, so that was a pretty cool moment too. Yeah, there's a lot of good ones, but those would be the 2 just off the top of my head, because we weren't supposed to win with those dudes, and then after that, that kind of set a precedence, because then now it became a thing to import mercenaries to Europe, and now you can't do that really anymore, other than like one dude. So that was kind of a game changer. So that was rad to be part of those 2 game changer things.
Oh yeah, and along those lines of favorite moments, how about some of the favorite people that you were around during your playing career? So tell me about who were your favorite teammates to play with on your team, and then who were some of your biggest rivals on the field?
Oh, it's not a fair question, because it's a fair question, but I mean, there's just so many names. Well, 2 of the guys along the way that have been really good teammates and antagonists at some point in time were Davey Williamson and Todd Martinez. Just because I played my first day of paintball with Davey Williamson, and he hasn't played in years, so maybe some newer people don't know who Davey is. But I grew up with him. I knew him since we were 12. He was one of the best men at my wedding. So, it was kind of cool to go through the experience, and we played on different teams sometimes. So that was kind of cool. And then I mean, I've known Todd Martinez since he was 14 or 15 years old. The very first time that you know Todd, right?
Oh yeah,
you met Todd.
Yeah, and it seems like one thing was funny, like having gotten to meet him in person a couple of times, was watching the documentaries and looking at him now. It seems like he hasn't changed a bit.
Oh man, he's the same dude. He's just older, a little bigger. But Todd was a freak athlete when he was a kid. Like, he was so athletic. So how I met Todd Martinez was, and this has been a theme for a long period of time in paintball. I typically like the greats. Like, if you're not like in my direct area, I'm gonna hear about you before I meet you or I see you. Because that's typically how it works. And even in this area, I had heard about Todd before I met Todd, when Todd was like 14, 15. And then he played on this junior Marine team. And so it was, like we didn't have, it was an amateur team at the time. Divisional team. There wasn't a lot of divisions back then. It was basically you were pro, AM-A, or AM-B. So he was like coming up AM-B, but as a teenager. And then our young Navarone group, by that time, a couple years in, we had made a name for ourselves. You can ask Todd about this, but we were like, all right, well, we're the young kids in Southern California. Like, this is our area. If you want to run game, let's go. If you want to be the best, like, let's go. We want to be the best. We want to play on one of these top teams, and we want to win a world title. Like, that's what we're trying to do. So Todd knew that, and so we needed a guy, and we were short a guy at the end of practice. And I went over and I saw all these young kids sitting on this little hill, and I walk over to these kids and I'm like, hey, we need a dude. Tim Kobayashi can't run. It was like one of this blazing fast Japanese dude I grew up with. Tim was great. And I was like, hey, Kobayashi can't go. We need a dude. Like, who wants to go? And all these kids were intimidated and looked to the ground, looked to the sky. Todd didn't flinch a bit. He looked me right in the eyes, and he was like, I can go. He's like, let's go. And I was like, okay. And I had heard, I was like, what's your name? He's like, Todd. I was like, okay, cool. And I heard about him. And I was like, hey, you fast? I knew he was fast. And he's like, yeah, I'm fast. I'm like, are you as fast as him? To my buddy Tim Kobayashi. He's like, I'm not as fast as him, but I'm really fast. I was like, okay, you're going to run all the way up here off the break. Big ass 10-man woods ball field, like 1996. And I'm like, you're going to shoot that way. And Todd didn't miss a beat. Blazing fast, ran up there, shot a bunch of dudes. That's how I met Todd Martinez. And I was like, okay, this kid's not scared. He's super fun. And so then that's how we became friends. So yeah, love Todd Martinez. So, but I mean, dude, Rich Telford has been a huge ally. He was, we butted heads a lot but that's how the sausage is made, is that you have two people that look differently at things, but are willing to engage each other into like hardcore conversations about things. And so yeah, Rich has been awesome. Pretty much everyone that's played on Dynasty over the years, Michael McLaughlin, back in the day, dude, I could go on for hours. But I mean, it's been fun it was fun to be there playing. I got Oliver Lang's rookie season. Like, I was Oliver Lang's back player in his rookie season. That was dope. That was kind of fun to watch. It was cool. Yosh Rao. Yosh has a special story too, because when Yosh first came up, a lot of those kids were getting names for themselves in California, and we had heard about how good Yosh was, but he didn't have that same clout that some of these, like the Ryans and Alex and Olivers, did, and he was just as good back then. He was just a different type of player, and so when he got on the Ironman, it was really fun to watch him blossom as a human and as an amazing, like, an elite level paintball player in front of my eyes. I was just like, wow, this Yosh Rao dude is an intellect, and he's really good. We went to London, actually. Was it London? I think it was London. And he was just running around shooting people. He played on Joy Division that year in 2001. So yeah, dude, I don't know. I could go on forever. There's been a lot of awesome dudes over the years. Got a lot of interesting stories with a lot of these dudes.
Oh yeah, I mean, just watching the films, even then, I was like, wait, this is like some of the greatest of all time names that are in these films all together at once. So I'm sure you've got plenty to choose from. How about rivals, though? Do you have any like notable rivals over your career?
Lasoya was always a big rival. I mean, Lasoya was a force of nature back in the day. Yeah, that dude was just, he would do anything that he could possibly do to beat you, So he was very, very difficult to deal with. Johnny Richardson was incredibly impressive. I used to love to gunfight LB Foul because I used to have to gunfight him a lot. Like we had a rivalry with Infamous. Always a lot of times it was me and LB Foul gunfighting each other in the back corner. All the Dynasty guys, just because they were they kicked the shit out of everyone for a while. So, we had to try to beat them. They were it's like, dude, you have to, like, again, I've said this before, but it's so important. We're not playing for our lives out here. We may be playing for a bit of blood in the sense that, you're going to get hurt. If you get shot 15, 20, 30 times in a match, like, it's going to hurt. But at the end of the day, you really have to thank your opponents, because without them, you have no idea how strong you actually are until you are pushed in a way that you don't have a choice in. It's like, I'm trying to do this thing, and like, that dude has what I want. So, all right, we're about to do this battle. And so it's been, and I mean, even like all the East Coast guys too. I mean, the All-Americans back in the day, all the OG Aftershock guys. I mean, we did battle against all those dudes, down in Florida, Rage. That's why I'm kind of proud of Texas, because, back in the day, Texas was not anywhere near the mecca of paintball. I mean, we gave Texas a beating most of the time, more than they gave us a beating. Whereas the Shock dudes and the Florida guys would give us a beating occasionally, and we'd catch her from the All-Americans and all those top teams, but not many people were getting beatings from Texas dudes, and that is not the case now. Now, Texas is the mecca of paintball, which crushes my California soul to say, but it doesn't make it any less true, just because I would like California to be better. But, I mean, if you look at how good the Texas teams have been at the divisional level, now Florida, all the Florida guys right now are probably be like, bro, this is blasphemy. What are you talking about? But, to me, it's meccas plural. But if I had to put my money, if we were like, let's gather all the players from everywhere, at least on the divisional level, and then see what happens, I'd have to put my money on Texas, because Texas is so strong, so deep at the divisional level. I mean, Florida's strong. The Northeast has gotten better. The Carolinas used to be super strong. I would like to see some badass teams come out of the Carolinas, because they've had a lot of elite players over the years. And then the Pacific Northwest is also represented throughout the years too. But at least from what I've seen, and there have been some good teams from the Pacific Northwest and Denver area, Midwest area. But as far as overall, just from what I've seen, and I would have to go and crunch the numbers on the divisional level, but just from what I've seen in the past, say 5 to 7 years, I would have to give the title of the mecca of paintball on planet Earth to the great state of Texas. Which, again, that's kind of hard for me to say. It's like, I feel like I'm stumbling on the words, you know what I'm saying? But it is what it is. I mean, as a logical human, you can't sit there and hope it's one thing or another. And again, like, hey, Florida guys, Northeast guys, Midwest dudes, Cali dudes, like, hey, well, everyone needs to step up then, because, as it stands, from what I've seen, it's probably Texas right now.
Probably. I mean, looking at scores, even just from this past event, I mean, granted, it was in Texas, so you're going to have a higher percentage of Texas teams competing, but, two of the top 4 teams in the pro division, Houston Heat and X Factor, and then you can even make a case for Infamous having several Texas players and calling Giant Party Sports in Dallas their home field, or at least affiliated with them.
Well, hold on just real quick. Houston Heat ain't a Texas team, because I'll quote your boy Colt Roberts on this, because anytime that I say that to Colt, he goes, other than Ryan Smith, show me the Texan. I'm sorry, Devin Stewart. Show me the Texans on that team. It's like, where are the other Texans? Because that's a superstar team that's imported talent for wherever they needed to import it from. I'm not taking no disrespect from the Texans on that team. However, Nico Hyde is no longer on that team. So now you got essentially Devin Stewart and Ryan Smith, and that's it, So whereas X Factor, bro, I mean, that's a Texas team, like, through and through. Yeah, they got, Billy as the adopted Texan, and then, Parrish and that sort of thing. But, yeah, still Respect to Texas, bro. I'm not just saying that because I'm on a Texas podcast right now, and because I've said this on the webcast, dude, many times for the past at least I'd say at least 3 years. California used to be the mecca of paintball. Florida has had a really solid run many years. The Northeast has been strong, never the mecca. The Carolinas have had some good representatives to step up to elite status. The Midwest too, and then the Pacific Northwest. But I again just think it's Texas right now. Well, you got me for a couple more minutes, bro. What else we got here?
All right. I gotta
finish this voiceover here.
So the big things. Let's see. This question is by our newest partner, Uno's Jerky, who is from Corpus Christi, also a member of the Texas Titan family. I've got a bag of his jerky right here. Has flavors named after some Texas teams, including the team that I'm on, Texas Titans. So visit his website, unosjerky.com. Use code PITS10. So this question is kind of how you transition from being a player into your current role as the voice of paintball. So what was it that brought about your retirement, and why, or I guess how did you make the connection to being your current position as the commentator for the pro division?
Well, it was kind of like a slow roll because, started doing I went to San Diego State and majored in creative writing. I started as a business major, but I was better at writing, so went that route. And then started getting, people being like, "Oh, hey, write this thing for me." And then eventually, in a year, then Patrick Sporer, sorry, my wife's like, "How much longer is this going to be?" I'm like, "Well, we're almost done, babe." It was, so it was just, I got used to saying yes a lot, man. It was just kind of like one of those things where Patrick was like, "Hey, I want you to write the intro for serial killers." I'm like, "What do you want me to write?" He's like, "I can't tell you what to write. Just write something to your experience and that you think is going to be good." So, and then did that, and it was well received. And then, was doing things for magazines, and then eventually, once, the early to like 2003 started rolling around, I had just gone up to Huntington Beach to drink beers and watch Dynasty play because we were locked out from playing the MPPL at the time because we were playing the NXL and we couldn't play in both that year. And the dudes that ran it, they sponsored us before. I had been in Europe with the Joy Division, in 2001, so I knew all the pure promotion guys because we were shooting Angels. So, and they had known some of the stuff that I'd done. So I was kind of sitting there helping them set up their booth. This is kind of how I got my start. And Will Arroyo was going to do the commentary for this TV show that they were going to do for Fox Sports or something. And so at Huntington Beach. And so, and he's like, and I hear him arguing in the phone. He's like, "Fuck, this sucks. God damn it." And then I'm like, he comes over. I'm like, "What's going on, Bart?" That was not Bart Yakimek, but the Bart that ran Pure Promotions. And he's like, English accent. I'm not going to try to butcher it, but he's like, "Oh, Will can't make it." And then he looks at me and he's like, "You should do it. You'd be perfect." And I was like, "Do what?" And he's like, "Do the commentary for the show we're going to do." And I was like, "Dude, I've never done that before. I don't know if I want to do that. Like, I just came up here to watch my boys play, paintball and drink some beer." And he's like, "You can do that and we'll pay you." He's like, "You just have to watch, the games and call the games live, meet our producer, this or that." So, and I was broke at the time, so I needed money. So I'm like, "Okay, cool. I got it." And then, so I just got used to saying yes. So that's 2003. Like, I'm in the middle of my pro career at the time. So I was doing both for years. Like, we did a gig for ESPN and then did another gig for ESPN, did the Miami event. And I was playing with Excessive Energy at the time. We ended up winning the semi-pro division to get us another pro team. And then next year we took first and third. This is like a story that ended up we didn't tell on Heroes for a Day, but it was a cool story. So while we won Miami that year to get a second pro team, and then the next event, the next year, we take first and third at Huntington Beach in 2006. so I had to like gear down and go out and do the open in front of like a bunch of people. And how I kind of realized that I could do it was the dude that was kind of the host was like kind of messing up a bit. And I knew all the stuff that he didn't know. So I was just like, well, this is what this is and this and that. And I had to like quiet the crowd down. So I'm like, oh, it was a super nervous situation for me because I'd never done that. But I was like, I feel like I can handle this. And so it just kind of snowballed from there. I just got kind of used to saying yes a lot. And then Patrick came up to me, Patrick Sporer, who created all the, Push, Sunday Drive, Serial Killers, Heroes for a Day in the late 2000s. And he was like, hey, he's like, you've been doing these gigs for TV. He's like, do you think you could do it live? Because none of that stuff was live. It was all in post-production, which is way more expensive. And then he's like, well, technology has advanced that we could just do this live, webcast it on the internet. And I said, yeah, again, just got used to saying yes a lot. I'm like, yeah, sure, I can do it. No idea if I could actually do it or not. And then so we, and that's a whole nother story. And so then did that. And then that's when I kind of realized that I had a new passion. I'd kind of won all the tournaments I wanted to win and was a top level player and had respect to my peers and did all this sort of stuff. And I was like, okay, I accomplished every goal that I want to accomplish as a player. To me, it's much more important for the grand scheme of paintball for me to go do this is what I want to do. So I was just like, all right, so I'm gonna go do this now. So I mean, I still wanted to play, but at that point it was like selfish almost to me to continue to play, because yeah, I could go, finish off my career and play, as long as I could. And I just come off a couple good events. I had a good event at World Cup at the time, but we took third. But I don't know. My burning passion now was to tell the paintball story because no one was doing that, and I wanted to carry that torch. So I was like, all right, it's like this is an opportunity to try to help us all, because again, like we've discussed, if you don't know the story, then it doesn't exist in the world, and you don't, the more you know, the more you want to know. And so that's been my quest. My quest was to try to be one of the best paintball players on planet Earth and to win paintball tournaments and win a title. And then now, and has been my quest since the late 2000s, when it really kind of dawned on me that that's what I wanted to do. But that's been my quest, is to try to just let as many people know as possible how cool this is and what it is and who does it, how they do it, all those different things.
Well, we're glad that you made the career change, because I don't think that we would be where we are now without you stepping up to fill those shoes, because it's definitely a very, very important job that someone is at the helm for. So we appreciate you telling all of these stories for all of these years. And so this final question, that this is one that I ask everybody, is kind of about the upcoming stories for newer people, or those that maybe aren't as popular as some. So this question is brought to us by GetDatShot, who's an NXL Pro Media member. Message GetDat_shot on Facebook or Instagram for media coverage at the upcoming NXL Mid-Atlantic Major or the July USXPL event. So is there anybody in paintball, either teams, players, brands, projects, that have caught your attention lately? So who do you think in paintball deserves more recognition for what they're doing?
Well, man, from a company standpoint, I mean, there's honestly, like, there's a lot of misunderstanding of how, like I talked about earlier, like, are we fucking around or playing golf? There's a lot of misunderstanding about how things work, what is required to actually get things done. So anyone that's run a company that's profitable and still existing, dude, respect. I do love what the Hormesis guys are doing, though. Just because they are pumping a lot of money into stuff. I mean, it's like even the little shit that, like, so the coins that we give out. I mean, I have these red and gold coins that we give out. So the people that win 101 tournament or 101s in the actual, that Alex just created those and made them. And he just gives them away for free. Like, that doesn't cost, that's just, he's just spending that money on that. He's, it's just a cool thing to see guys like Alex and Oliver and the dudes at Field One kind of come in and do that thing, where they give a shit so much about the sport that they're spending money to do cool things. I love that. But I mean, again, it's just, I have friends at all these different companies. I've either worked for or with all these companies over the years. The HK guys are awesome. Chris and the boys at Dye are sweet, and I'm not just like trying to throw this out to pump these dudes up because, I mean, these are friends of mine, man. Like, these guys have gone through wars to have their companies still exist, to bring new products to market, you know? So it's just really kind of cool to see. But then on the team side of things, and then also all the new media guys. Like, to be honest, like, it makes my paintball heart smile to see how many new, like, even, again, just the fact, guys like yourself, dude, like, I've never met you until tonight, you know, like, but just the fact that people care enough to go to try to create something. It's like, all right, well, I'm gonna try to do this thing, throw it out in the world. Like, that's how I had to start doing things too. I mean, I didn't know if anyone was gonna like any of this stuff. To be honest, I was scared shitless. You know, first time people were like, hey, Matty, write this thing. I'm like, what am I supposed to write? They're like, I don't know, figure it out. I'm like, okay, let me try to write something cool. You know, it's or try to do this thing, or let's create this project. It's been a really difficult the whole entire time. So anyone that's doing anything creative in the paintball landscape, tip of my hat and respect to you, man. Impressive. We need more of that. Team wise, and I do need to go here pretty soon, but because I could speak about the team stuff for forever, but just based on what we have seen through the first 2 events, on the underdog status, you know, before I get into the top dogs, I would have to say it's been incredibly impressive to see what New York Extreme has done. I mean, New York Extreme has been lights out. They finished their last event plus 14, bro. Like 22 points for, 8 against. I mean, undefeated in the prelims. They were amazing at the last event. They actually did better at the last event they did this one, you know, because they made it, you know, into the semifinals. They lost to Heat by 1 point. I mean, they beat the shit out of Level. They beat the Bears by 2. That was their local rival. Talk shit as they were doing it. It was super entertaining. Beat the Ironman by 3. Beat ML Kings by 4. New York Extreme is a team to watch. The Hurricanes have been incredibly consistent. 2 7th-place finishes in a row, combined with some Sunday appearances last year. The question for the Hurricanes is, you know, can they get, you know, past that quarterfinal round? Aftermath had an incredibly impressive performance with a roster that not a lot of people know. That's amazing. It's very difficult to do in the Pro Division. 6th place for them at the last event, undefeated in the prelims. They had a +6 overall, plus or minus. And then, dude, yeah, it's just been so crazy to watch Dynasties run. You know, Jesus Christ, man. I mean, I'm running out of, you know, I'm running out of big words and hyperbole to describe how impressive Dynasty is at this point. Literally, after we sign off, I'm gonna go home, hug my kid. I'm gonna go to the bathroom, and I'm gonna get right back at this computer, and I'm gonna write some voiceover. And what I need to try to finish off is like how amazing Dynasty is, because I'm just been describing how amazing they are for the past couple years, and it's just I'm running out of ways to say it. You know, they're just, I think the thing, maybe the metaphor I'm gonna go with, because it's just so true, is that they are just taking a giant wooden stake to the hearts of everyone's dreams right now, and it's kind of impressive to see.
I'm just waiting for who's going to knock them off. I think that there's a couple of teams that are really close. Just from my personal biases and fandom, I guess you could say, I hope it's X Factor. I hope that X Factor finally gets over that hump. I know they've met Dynasty, like they've been stopped by Dynasty, it seems like, and pretty much exclusively Dynasty for the past 2+ years. You know, half the time in the finals, just going up against Dynasty. I know I went up against them in this most recent event in the semifinals. I hope that it's X Factor, because I want to see them get over that. So, Matty, that brings us to the end of our show. Thank you again so much for your time. I know this definitely wasn't a short episode, but definitely a sweet one, chock full of everything. So this question brought to us by Compete, which is Jell Stewart's brand of soft goods. So message him on Facebook or Instagram, mention In the Pits for 10% off of your order. So Matty, thank you so much for your time. Do you have any last shout outs or things you'd like to say before we sign off?
My pleasure, man. Thank you so much for having me on here. And just again, you know, please try to support whatever all the creators are doing. Subscribe to Go Sports. You know, like and subscribe to, as everyone says, to all the people trying to create things, because they need it. You know, that's what we need right now. We need more people that care and that are trying to magnify the stories that exist. And the people creating those stories are doing all they can with what they have. And that's always my plea. You know, like, we're doing all we can with what we have. If we had more subscribers and we had more people supporting us, we could take it to another level. I would love to create that third way. If you want to be a pro paintball player and if you want to shoot for the moon, you got to be a hired gun for a rich guy or a poster boy for a company. Like, we need more people to care about paintball so we can create that third way. Because if we can't put asses in seats and make people care, like, that's the most important thing. So that's my constant plea. That's it. That's all I got.
For sure. All right. Thank you, Matty. Thank you, everybody online, so much for tuning in. Be sure to go follow Matty. That's at Matty Marshall SD on Instagram. And then, of course, give your support to all those creators out there. There's so many of them, especially nowadays, that are so deserving. So what other guests would y'all like to see on the show? Be sure to leave a comment down below. While you're at it, hit that subscribe button. The show goes live weekly here on youtube.com/@inthepitspaintballpodcast, and recordings are posted to YouTube, Amazon, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify the next day. Quick shout out to my partners and sponsors: Uno's Jerky, FUAthletics, Get That Shot, Paintball Kumite, Compete, Hustletown Paintball, and Hermes PB. We will see you all next week for episode 51. We're going to have Cal Leach of the semi-pro team Casey Missouri All-Stars. Excuse me, another Texas story here. Has Texas origins, played here for such a long time. He's one of the examples that I always give when I say I want to keep Texas talent in Texas. So we'll get his story on next week. And we will be posting the June episode schedule here pretty soon. Matty, thank you again for your time.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.